Good evening, ladies and gents. Today we're going to be doing another tips and tricks video on Rimworld. I will be starting off with a few tips and tricks and then probably wrap it up with what type of mods I use, and then of course just my thoughts on Rimworld itself. This is of course going to be on the vanilla version. So that being said, let's kick it off with the new things to or the things that you're supposed to know, not the new things, or if you don't know, you're supposed to know about them. So, that being said, when you do start off, you have, of course, various different ways to start off. You can pick whichever way, depending on what suits you best. In terms of the storyline, I would be, especially if you're in the beginning, I'd probably for sure choose Cassandra, but if you're a little bit more experienced, go with, you know, Randy. Randy is completely psychotic at some point, but it'll be a hell of a lot more fun. And now you can, of course, do all the settings. All of this you should pretty much know. What I want to do is jump to the world. I want to show you what the new player is supposed to know. So let's say go between like 7 to 30, that's pretty nice. So anywhere between like 5 and 30 degrees, it's a pretty good start. With a little bit of rock again, because you do want to get the minerals. You don't want to rely on importing minerals. You want to mine, so I have just a little bit of rock, not a lot, because you don't want to be building on that. That's literally just the beginners. If you're absolutely new to the game, I'd go with something like that, and you should be good to go. A little bit of rocks, you can get your minerals and everything else, so it should be fine. And I wouldn't go in the tropical rainforest, because that's just a complete mess. Don't do that. Don't do that. Pick a temperate forest and a little bit of rocks, and you should be fine with the temperature, and that's a very good start. So, and once you actually do pick where you want to start off, you of course get to the selection screen. So, one of the most important things, you need a cook, you need a construction guy, and you need a miner. These are one of the three main things. Of course, if they can craft, that would be also ideal, so preferably have crafting involved as well. So theoretically what you're trying to do is at least have each of them have 2 skills. So you have a cook and a medic, and you have a miner and a crafter, or theoretically the working jobs you'd like them split apart. So you know, you try to get as many split apart. Now the one thing you got to keep in mind is that there are these traits. Okay? Ideally, the traits I wouldn't be so stressed about, but there's like a few things you want to like absolutely avoid. You want to absolutely avoid the permanent mood effects that are negative. You know, for example, I don't know, depressive traits, some shit like that. You want to absolutely avoid that from the start, right? You don't want absolutely no one depressed. Anyone with a permanent negative trait. You don't want anyone psychic sensitive. There's a lot of these psychic events happening in the game, and you're going to get pretty screwed on that. You don't want anyone lazy. You don't want anyone depressive. You don't want a tortured artist, even though they're going to have tortured artists have extremely high arts. But they have, again, a permanent mood debuff, which is of -6, I believe, or something like that. And you don't want a body purists, because body purists don't like when you put artificial limbs on them, or like bionics. And that is literally for, I would say, the middle or late game, because sooner or later everyone's going to get like their a leg shot off at some point, and you're going to need to stick body parts on them. And they're just a huge pain in the ass, because you can't put anything on them. And they're just the biggest pain. So, and that of course brings me to the next point, is in the same sense, you do not want to recruit anyone with these traits. So you don't want anyone psychically sensitive, completely out of the question. Lazy again, he could be lazy because it just makes him a little bit slower. You could throw in a lot of, you know, bionics to speed him up. As long as he's really damn good, you know, I think you could get away with the lazy. Psychically sensitive, absolutely no way. Body purist, absolutely no way. Depressive, absolutely no way. These 3, you really don't want them there, right? And there's a couple of other traits, like to sort of have an idea, you got to deal with them in some way, but I'd say these are like the main traits you really want to completely avoid. The depressive type, tortured artist, yeah, as well, because that's a permanent mood debuff. You know, psychic sensitive, that is like way no. That is like, I don't matter how damn good he is, because he'll just lose his mind. Those psychic attacks happen quite frequent, and he'll just destroy half the crap. You know, pyromaniac, you can sort of get away with it when you have enough people. If they do have their like hit fit and they start burning shit up, as long as you have your fire foam poppers, and it's not really a big deal, you know, as long as if he releases his pyromaniac mood, he actually gets a massive buff of 40, and that's most of the other people as well, you know, when they have their mood swings and they just let go, they get a huge buff as well. So the pyromaniac one is a little bit annoying, but when you have enough people, later on it's more than enough, because you completely ignore it and everyone puts out the fire before they do any damage, so that is fine. So the moment you choose what you want, and the starting based on what I told you, then you're pretty much good to go and you get a head start, and now we can jump into the game. So with the actual basic setup out of the way, you actually start off your game. First thing you got to do is put down immediately a recreation, because they do need a recreation, a horseshoe, a horse spin, whatever, of wood, of stone, whatever the hell it is, because they need recreation or they lose their mind. Second thing you got to do is you got to put down a table and make them sit on a stool, because that's the cheapest thing, because they need a place to eat, because then again that gives them a mood debuff. And the quickest thing you got to do is get them all in a room. In the beginning you can throw them all in one room, you build a room, you can put on like the sleeping beds, which is just like a square without an actual bed, but this gives them a place to sleep in. As long as they actually sleep all in one room without being outside, you prevent those debuffs. Now, as early as possible, I would recommend is not to get the bigger rooms, but to get the actual smaller rooms, because these are already the big ones. Here I have the, or I don't have them. No, yeah, I don't think I have them anymore. I think they're all actual big, yeah. There's the smaller rooms. These are 5x5. As early as possible, because early on in the game, it sort of makes it easier for you. They don't have very high expectations. What you want to do is try to get rooms 4x4. So this is 5x5, get 4x4. Each of them with their own room. And they get a massive debuff, in the massive buff, I mean, in the beginning. Because they don't have still sky-high expectations. And as the game goes by, their expectations are going to go higher and higher and higher and higher. And then, of course, they need more and more things. And then another thing to do as early as possible, the moment you actually manage that, is to get them the actual, what do you call it? To get them the double beds. Wooden double beds in the beginning. This way, when they can have their relationships, you don't need to micromanage them. Get them the double beds, and they can just keep switching beds between each other, because, you know, the whole love affair, bold and beautiful lifestyle is going on here. Never ending. So at some point, you just completely ignore who the hell's sleeping with who, because everyone's going to be sleeping with everyone at some point or another. So that is pretty much the basics kicked off right off the bat, and then we'll move on with some other more basics. What you're going to need to do is, of course, build temperature control, depending on where you pick it. If you're going to pick it where I recommend it to, somewhere where the temperature throughout the year is pretty easy, good to go, that'll give you like an opportunity to make the biggest and most efficient base as possible. Hence, you'll do what you need to do. And I forgot the point that I was getting to, but I'll jump on to another one. So, yeah, true, the temperatures. So, the moment you research electronics, or if you do already have electronics, what you're going to then do is build your temperature controls, as you do see here. What I do have is I have my air cons, and then I have my heaters. In the beginning, you're going to need to switch on your air cons and switch off your heaters, because you won't have a lot of power, blah, 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 blah. But later on, as you can see, I have my air cons and my heaters on throughout the whole base, because there's another tip that I don't know if most of you know, that the actual heaters don't use a lot of heat if it's not needed. So though they are on, their consumption is very low. It's only, now it's 175 watts, but it's maybe 20 watts when it's not really needed, and they don't really heat up the room. And the air cons do the heating, so it's like a 2-in-1 thing. So they go up and down automatically, as well as the air con as well. See, now you see the air con is low. It's only using 20 watts because it's not really needed. And if I move my mouse outside, you see on the bottom right here, it says outdoors, it's 5 degrees. That's why my heaters are now mainly on. And that's why later on, what I just generally do is I put heaters and air cons in every single room, and I keep them on when I have plenty enough power, and they can literally manage everything as in regards to the actual temperatures as well. You can be efficient. In the medicals, I don't put vents to make it efficient, because I just really want them like individual, because medical rooms are medical and I don't want any shit happening there. And I literally share, you can say, the aircon with 2 rooms and just up to 2 heaters, because cold snaps, one just generally doesn't do it. So 1 aircon, 2 rooms, and 2 heaters per each room, and I have a vent here as well. So that becomes a little bit more efficient in regards to that. Now the butcheries, of course, you want your butchery in the beginning. You're gonna have a very tiny butchery. You can have your actual kitchen or stove very close to the to where the storage is, to where your fridge is, you know, and your butcher tables as well. Now I have it split, so generally in the beginning you have, let's say, the butcher here and your electric stove here, and you have the actual fridge really close by, you know. So that is another thing you're going to need to do, is really making sure that it's close by the butcher, the stove, and your fridge in the beginning, because you don't have a lot of pawns, you don't have a lot of people. This is as vanilla as it can go. I do have a couple of mods, but none of the mods that I have currently installed on this gameplay are, I would say, enhancing the vanilla gameplay as much. Again, like I said, I'll get into that later, and I'll explain what mods I have and why I'm playing it the way it is. But this is a vanilla game as far as I'm concerned. So And then of course to give my thoughts and feedback on why I decided to play it this way. So that's what you're going to do in the beginning. You're going to chuck in your butchers and then your stoves. You're going to make sure it's close. Again, another thing is make sure every single fridge that you do have has at least a double wall. It insulates the temperature in much better. So that is really, really good to know. And you know the temperatures by like moving the mouse over it. You see 21 degrees outside indoors. You see it right here. It shows indoors and outdoors. So around 21 degrees for living is very comfortable. And freezing, you're trying to keep it as cold as possible. And that brings me to another point. Make sure your freezers are as cold as possible. I have the double doors with the space because it reduces the amount of cold air coming out. And another thing is I do have my coolers set to minus 70. I can't put more coolers to reduce the temperature, which I actually might. And I would recommend to keep them at least at minus 30, if not a minus 40. I think I got another freezer here. I don't know if it's that. Yeah, minus 45 is the best. And I have a couple of bodies. I'll get to that a little bit later. Blocked. So ideally at minus 45 you keep your freezers much higher, because if you do have a solar flare, I can't even speak. If you do have a solar flare which cuts off all the electricity in your whole base, that room can still stay cold and your food won't spoil. So I always like over freeze it the necessary, because it gives me that time till the actual solar flare kicks back on. So I over freeze the rooms, and I'd recommend you do the same thing. As you see, I do have it insulated at least to everywhere to keep the cold. And yeah, this is a big freezer and stuff. So yeah, that is the freezer, that is the butchering, that is the cooling, the insulation. To keep an eye out for that. And let's move on.